By Michael Taylor, senior economist at Lombard Street Research. Also with us at the moment, Alpesh Patel, principal of Profenium Partners, and hopefully we'll get a currency view with Paul Robson, who will also join the discussion. Michael, let's join you first of all. Public finances. What we didn't announce there was that the total borrowing for the year came in less than we expected. 145 billion. We were looking for 153. In fact, if compared to what the expectations were in January, we were looking at 170 billion. So we've already saved ourselves 25 billion without doing anything. It's fantastic.
Yeah, at this rate, we won't have a budget deficit by this time next year. That's fantastic news. Clearly, there was a £7.5 billion downward revision to the deficit for the last financial year. I think actually it is a serious point, though, in that at the moment the revisions obviously tend to be towards a reduced deficit. But in terms of our debt profile and the whole issue of debt sustainability, nominal GDP is now growing, so the deficit to GDP ratio, it's come down to 10.4%, I think it is, after the revisions. At least it's heading in the right direction, and with the fiscal tightening that's going to inevitably come and be announced on the 22nd of June and implemented, one hopes, the UK's fiscal position potentially could improve quite quickly.
Quite quickly, which is good news. And what's interesting, this is 13 billion lower total borrowing than the March budget forecasts, and here we are in May, of course. It actually makes this wrangling over the 6 billion seem like really small beer. I mean, we knew it was small beer before, but it's even smaller now.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Yes, that 6 billion was just nothing compared with, like you say, 1 month's revisions, and it's more than disappeared. It's very important with the public finances to recall, as ever, that they are the difference between two exceptionally large numbers.
Yes,
and those differences can swing around enormously rapidly. They're very volatile. The important thing is to look at the trend, where it's going. And I think there are some encouraging signs, at least.
What is also interesting, Alpesh, is this, I think yesterday this week we had very good demand for a 10-year gilt auction. In fact, they got it away at a price higher than the DMO was expecting. So has it lessened concerns about the British debt situation?
What you're really asking is, have we been overly pessimistic? Is there far better news than we've realised, and is this continuation or the start of a trend upwards?
Yes.
I think we're being a bit rose-tinted spectacle wearing if we're starting to think that this is just fantastic news. As we heard, these are revisions, and it seems to me a bit like they're actually just figures which are within the margin of error, rather than there's something fundamentally changed in the economy. Yes, things are a little bit better than we were anticipating. Than our worst fears, but let's not get carried away.
Because this morning the front page on the business section Daily Telegraph is City fears Great Depression Mark II.
And what you're thinking is headlines are never correct, so let's do the opposite.
And I've got better borrowing numbers here. I'm going to feel a bit more chirpy.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you feel like running out and buying a bucket load of equities right now?
I don't know. We've had a 10% correction.
I think that things are pretty bad. They're as bad as we've thought they were, and we're desperately looking for silver linings.
Let's look at the other data, Michael. First of all, the lending data, the mortgage data. Is this because the big companies don't want the money?
Well, you both mentioned exports, which is going to be crucial to any recovery. What does, and of course banks are going to be crucial to any recovery in terms of oiling the wheels, as it were. What are you doing to help those exporters reach those foreign markets? You're a global bank. What do you actually proactively do to help the companies who are clients to help reach those export markets?
Well, let me first of all give you some facts. In 2009 compared to 2008, our import and export activity increased by about 32%. In the 4 months of 2010 compared to the same period in 2009, volume of exports through our customers by HSBC is up 15% and value is up 23%. So we are seeing export activity taking place as we speak. What are we doing? Well, we're connecting our customers with our commercial banking operations, corporate banking operations in other countries to help them enter markets that they're not particularly familiar with, because we have bankers on the ground in many of those countries where we can credit vet their customer, help them do the trade finance while the export is on the water. And what we're trying to do is use our local knowledge and connect our local teams in 60 countries to make export become a reality.
What do you make of the complaint which has been levied against the banks that they're hoarding money, they're not lending to businesses to the extent the businesses want them to? Is that correct, or is it correct that, look, if you get quality businesses coming to you, you'll lend to them, it's just that you're not getting quality businesses coming to you? Where does the truth lie?
I think the truth lies in many areas, but let me first of all give you some top-level statistics. New business lending to businesses here in the UK by HSBC is up 17% year on year. So the volume of new business lending to UK manufacturing and UK service businesses has increased. That said, there is also an increase in the amount of debt repayments that's taking place from existing customers. And let me give you one statistic. The amount of overdraft balances or overdraft facilities we advance to UK businesses, and compare that to the amount they're actually utilising, pre-recession the utilisation rate would have been around 50%. 50% used, 50% available to borrow. The utilisation rate in December of 2009 dropped to 40%. So in a recession, when your instinct would have suggested overdraft facilities would have been used more, sure, they actually went down. That statistic has moved a little bit in 4 months, but there is still in excess of 55% of overdraft facilities undrawn. Now, you will always find a business that would want to borrow and is declined. And that, lending is a judgmental aspect. So you will not lend to every business that wants, because you need to make a judgment call on are they viable for the repayment. But in aggregate, I think there is debt available, there is capacity to lend, and the evidence for me is 55% unutilised on overdraft facilities. New business lending is up 17% by HSBC year on year, but there's still a long way to go. There's uncertainty on the horizon.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Steve, for joining us. Neil Quinn, Head of Commercial Banking at HSBC.
Back on your laurels.
Can I just ask you about a couple of the UK oil companies? When we look at Cairn Energy and BP, if you had to pick one, would you say BP because it's held up well despite its problems, or would you say Cairn because whilst it's been a great performer over the last 6 months, it's up about 30%, yeah, it'll continue, or won't it? Which, if you had to pick one?
At this point in time, I would go with Cairn. And I say that primarily because of the difficulty that BP is facing at the moment. And I think that is such a huge, and at this point in time I'm going to say slightly unknown in terms of where we're ultimately going to go with either legislation, with taxes or something like that, and I think it is a very BP specific story. I think with Cairn, between those two, I would have to go with the latter, just because of certainly the smaller amount of risk that's associated with it. Share price rise, obviously that's a concern as well.
Richard, good to see you. Thanks very much, Steve, for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Richard Nolan, oil and gas analyst at Down & Stewart. Good stuff.
My business partners are German, so I've got to support Bayern Munich. But I've got to ask you about this JP Morgan report, which you may not have read. It's about 80 pages long, and it explains why England are going to win the World Cup. Now tell me, just between you and I, no one else, tell me, should I be putting a bet on England to win the World Cup?
This probably says yes, this says no. Not at the odds.
You probably can't get any odds, can you?
Well, you can. I mean, you can back them at 11-2 with us at the moment, but you look at who they're up against. They're up against Spain, who are 4-1, and Brazil at 5-1.
Spain never perform.
No, they only won the European Championships last time.
Yeah, but they don't perform on the world
yeah,
stage.
I mean, if I'm truly honest with you, they never can be value England in this country, because people will back them irrespective of what the price is. And you're right, I haven't read that JP Morgan 80-page document. I don't know if I've read anything over 80 pages in the last few years, but I think England at the prices are probably not the value. They do have chances.
Yeah, but like all good quant strategists, they started off with what's the result we want, and then gave us 80 pages to prove.
Yeah. I read every single word of that 80 pages.
But hang on, if the conclusion hadn't been England to win the World Cup, would anybody have run that story?
Quite possibly. I think it was independent. And it was independent research, just as all other research from banks is independent.
Yeah, they did it for publicity reasons. It's my own personal opinion.
I think they won that particular battle anyway.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about it, right?
Banks' research shocker.
Yeah. That was a big week for London 2012 as the official mascots were unveiled. Wenlock and Mandeville have received mixed reviews. The one-eyed characters formed from the last drops of steel left over from the construction of the Olympic Stadium will grace various pieces of merchandise, from pins to T-shirts to duvet covers, and potentially Tron's phones. Organisers are hoping retail sales of the two characters will top £1 billion, which would be an Olympic record. Have you seen these, Alpesh? Seen these?
I haven't.
Wenlock and Mandeville?
No.
Is this your first chance to see them?
This is. I'm looking at it on screen now. It looks.
There we go. There they are. That's them.
Looks fascinating. To be honest, what I'm more concerned about, rather than the costs and whether we're going to hit the targets with the Olympics, and I'm sure we will, is the Commonwealth Games coming up, and Team England and Team Wales and teams Northern Ireland and Scotland, but whether or not they'll be able to raise the funding they need to get out there and do a good job in India for the UK, and there's a serious risk if the sponsors don't get, or more sponsors don't get behind them. They've had a good start. If more sponsors don't get behind them, then we'll be suffering in the UK, and that'll have a knock-on effect with our performance in the Olympics, because it's the training ground. So there are some very serious issues about sponsorship in the Commonwealth Games for Team GB, as it were.
Okay, when are the Indian Games?
September, October, I believe.
Okay, all right. So try and work that out. Now, talking about the Olympic Games, men's basketball has been played continuously at the Olympic Games.